Alright, hello YouTube people. Welcome to the Antichess World Championships alongside the Unknown Guy Reborn, and we will be streaming today. Currently, I am not heard on his Twitch, but I guess we'll find out if that works eventually. Tugger, do you have any predictions for the match?
I think it's gonna be close within 2 games. I think, definitely. But I don't know who's gonna win. They've been both players have been strong for the tournament, and I have lost to both. So
It has started. The game has started, and Flow has opened with NH3.
really,
Yes. And Kex responds with E6. And so we're going to see this line, I'm guessing E3. And by the way, we'll be showing every game from White's perspective. It's basically first person to reach 6.5, so it's best out of 12. Is the stream up yet?
yes, the stream is live. However, there's a delay, so it won't be up yet. Okay, so yeah, once the delay finishes, the stream will update, so it'll probably be here after this game. However, this game will still be covered
Okay.
in the stream. So,
And can it hear me yet?
uh, can you speak again quickly?
Hello.
Yes, it catches you.
Okay.
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 Oh,
So
wait.
this is sort of mainline stuff. I don't know about King F1 or if this is prep. Both sides look fairly nice for now. Both knights on the queen side look a little stuck, but this is probably preparation, so it looks pretty good. It looks fairly even.
Do you think Kex is gonna take with the rook here?
I think the rook is definitely more risky. I think there could be some issues. Yeah, I can't see a perfect refutation. And he does.
So the thing is, if you play f3, you're going to be attacking the king and the pawn, which are both defended by two different pieces. So you can't undefend them both. If you try to with an intermediate, white has a lot of defended pieces anyway. So if you play like rook g1, rook takes f2, rook takes g7, and then just rook takes bishop, and everything's defended from that point on. So I think Flo will likely go for rook g1. But black, I think, is safe here.
Yeah, F3 does look very risky. Okay, H4. It's also an interesting move, offering to take two of Kex's pawns, but in return you get... Although it could be slightly risky with your pawn so far up the board, it's also very tough to actually make something happen with it. And so Kex just retreats.
So black's next move probably going to be something along the lines of king g7, maybe h6.
And knight c3. This attacks the d5 square, where both the knight and the pawn defend. However, at this point, the bishop isn't actually completely stuck, because if at some point you play bishop h3, there's the king right there now is covering g2, but both rooks are guarding the back rank, so it could get a little tricky for sure.
Do you think Kex would try? Okay, well, there it is. I was going to suggest knight d7 because the knight, I mean, it can go to. Well, mental's getting timed out. It can go to c6, but there's the defensive resource knight e2, or even e5 works because if g5, the pawn can take instead of the bishop. Even if the bishop does take, it's attacking a piece that can't be undefended. So.
And a4 just grabbing space over here. This is also eventually going to threaten the bishop. If you ever, say, move the rook off of the a file, then pushing up the bishop will have to take. Program Fox also just let me know that it will be The match will be promoted on the live now.
Okay. Okay. One thing, the downside of a4 is that it does enable rook b1, or sorry, rook b8. I'm not sure if it's the greatest move, because then your bishop's kind of trapped in forever. After rook b1, rook a b1, knight takes. You have to play something like.
But you actually have the bishop actually becomes loose there. However, he doesn't go for it.
True.
A5 would allow the bishop to be trapped.
Bishop b7, trying to take material.
See, and I actually like white's position a lot more now.
Yeah, you were muted again on stream. I'll try to
fix. Yikes. Your Twitch doesn't like me.
But Michael's in the chat. Eno King, Pearl Stairs. Thanks for coming out.
I like this.
I will
e4 move as well, and bishop h6. Does e5 work? Okay, never mind. He's playing something else.
I got Primus in the chat.
And white with the extra knight might be slightly up here. As well as the king seems like it can be more active. And king e2 just improving the position of the king. And rook e1, the overpowering move. But this is just getting out of the way in case you ever want to move the h-pawn. And Kex, I think realizing that he's probably slightly worse notices there's nothing much better to improve the position, but so just moving the rook back and forth. Tugger, what are your thoughts on this position?
I'll check. I'm trying to fix frames.
Oh, right.
There we go. I would agree. White's pretty much winning here. Black doesn't really have much counterplay. I guess the only hope would either be rook b8 or rook d8. But now that's gone. Well, actually no. Now rook b8 exists.
Right.
The only problem is white or black has got to be careful to sack everything in time. So you can't ever play d4 because of c3. And if you play c3 first, like c3 yourself, then the king sacks on e4. So black has to find a way to either give the king up and free a pawn, or make sure that white pawn can't sack. But I feel like those are both going to be incredibly hard.
And I'm not so sure about this. I wasn't so sure about this knight d5 sacrifice, because now these two pawns for black look very strong this far down the board. However, after this, now it looks a lot better for white, because you're going to be able to give your rook and your pawn, and your king's already in position to be sacrificed very quickly. So I think this is just mate now.
I think my computer is about to explode. I can't see anything. My screen's completely frozen. I yeah. My task manager says it's at 96%, so I might have to.
Is it worth
Uh,
me streaming and you can let program, like, is it worth changing?
uh, if pro, Program Fox, if you're in the chat, maybe during if when
During a
Flo calls a
break.
break, we
Okay.
can switch to your channel.
G5 as well. This is a very interesting opening, actually.
Um,
Was not expecting this in the World Championship match.
Especially from Flo, B5, G5. I
Who
guess he's trying to
normally,
mix it up and get it a Kex's prep.
yeah, because Flo is generally known pretty well for playing very, very similar lines, which is why it's so surprising. All the lines are, all the lines are, have been pretty strange considering. C4, this pressures the knight down here, and it gets a little tricky because your bishop does open up. However, right now this is definitely fine because the knight covers the g4 square. However, this move right here, knight e5, is not. I don't know if it's the greatest move in this position, but what it definitely does do is it is very confusing. There's so many possibilities that can happen. There's so many different captures that white has to calculate. And so it can be very tough. Maybe a safe move is just something like queen a5 where you just or something where you just it's sort of just a waiting move almost. Now we have queen takes. And now you still might be thinking, well, what about g4 in the future? Right now the queen still has two opportunities to take, so I guess that's a little further down because you're worried about having to take with the bishop and then something like f3, knight g1. But remember, the knight can still take here, which actually saves the bishop somewhat. However, right now we're attacking two pieces, and the idea behind rook b8, I'm assuming, is to attack this weak b2 pawn. Then you have a lot of options for captures. Probably a2 is more likely the target because it opens up for white's rook. But white definitely has some counterplay. For example, we could see takes on c7, takes the bishop, and then takes king. That gets rid of the king, so if this does resolve properly, then the endgame becomes really positive for white. Or I guess taking the king this way could be possible. So right here, you can't. You might be able to take here. You can't take here because bishop captures, rook captures, and then just that. A similar thing could happen this way. I think this is probably the most likely candidate. However, again, that leaves this possibility. And then the other idea is if the queen has to take both of these pieces, eventually, say the rook ends up capturing all the way down here, you can't really capture back if your queen's right here because if you capture, the bishop captures, and then the bishop actually undefends the knight. Shall I put it up maybe, or yeah, okay.
Yeah, OBS, everything crashed.
Okay.
So, yeah. Fox is switching it because my stream went down.
Okay. There we go. On leechess.org. Confirm and go live. Alrighty. So, hello streamers. We're in game 2. Change opening is up 1-0. For those of you who are just tuning in, Kex is low on time here. Flo's up 1-0, and Flo has also been playing a bunch of very strange openings that we've never seen him play before. So this has already been an interesting match. Kex is bringing in 2 pieces, likely to be a little more confusing. However, this definitely looks good for black. You have a lot of different ideas, all of which could be possibly winning. I'm just gonna make sure this is working.
Yeah, black has mate. After rook takes queen, rook takes pawn, rook takes knight, it's just over.
Alright, and then the other thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open up this thing and this thing now. There we go. Rook takes, and that's it. So Flo is up 2-0 now. We're gonna keep viewing from white.
At h3, so you think?
It could be interesting. We don't normally see Flo play NH3, but we do see it again. And I'm assuming we will... Oh, and so no E3 this time, so avoiding Flo's prep. So we're going to avoid this prep now. So originally Flo playing NH3 to get out of Kex's whatever his defense to E3 was, which we probably would have seen E6 or C5 or something. It just completely goes out of the ordinary and goes NH3. And already Kex, after the first game, responding with E6 like he normally does. We see B6 instead this game, getting out of Flo's prep. So this is really interesting because in a World Championship match, both players are thinking on move 2, which is because they just don't play these lines ever. And so G3 I think is a very common move here. You want to be able to open up your bishop for sure.
Does E6 lose here?
Yeah, maybe B4, bishop G2.
Actually, I might be fine, just because the knight now guards F2. But it looks a little bit sketchy.
It does look very sketchy. Bishop G2 and bishop B2 are both... Or bishop what's it? Bishop B2 doesn't look great because of how many captures it requires. Because it requires capturing on G7 and H8. And so the black bishop will be able to capture D2, E1, and then all these captures are all possible afterwards. There's so many available.
So maybe bishop G2 is playable over bishop B2, but you'd give up your king. So I'm not sure if Flo would want to do that. But he goes for it. So yeah, bishop takes rook, bishop takes king, queen takes pawn. I mean, everything
I
else
don't think you play queen takes pawn though. Because
really? You maybe go for queen takes bishop. Wow.
Yeah, because if you take the pawn, then black just takes back and then you have to take on E1.
Okay, queen H4, sidestepping. Maybe we'll see knight A6, B5,
and then D5. I think there's probably a million different ways to win here.
Yeah.
G5 doesn't work though, we should note, because of knight takes G5.
Yep.
Because then there's so many pieces to capture.
Knight H6 now is forced. I guess bishop takes H5 is going to be what Flo goes for. Okay. Oh, did we have a slip up? After knight H6, we had bishop takes knight.
But the queen's just open.
Ah. So Kex just waits around with like, I guess, rook H8. Rook H8, queen takes D6, rook H7, queen takes E6, and then rook anywhere.
Yeah. All right, so Kex is back in it, as we sort of expected. And c4, the classic Kex opening. He's been playing e3 a lot of these world championships, but we finally see c4. So, and we see the fake Polish, which is, and Flo obviously ready for this.
Sure. I think Kex likes, or okay, well, Stockfish for sure likes taking with the queen there. However, we take with the king to preserve some integrity on the queen side. Otherwise, you kind of get well. Black lurches forward with b5, queen takes, and then there's a bit of a race after queen c7. Queen takes bishop, queen takes b2, takes rook, takes a pawn, takes knight. So, just avoiding that, you play king takes.
And d5 definitely an interesting move here because obviously pushing d5 normally is pretty risky because e and c pawns. However, because they're both gone, d5 is a little safer. You don't have the bishop on c8 to get rid of, and also what it was threatening last move when the pawn was on f4 was something like e5 takes and then queen takes, rook takes, and then your bishop's also free. And so Kex prevents that with f5, and now we're seeing b4 sort of pinning this bishop down, so e6 or e5 is a tougher option. And in the chat, EL12SW, this is a game out of 12, so basically they need to win 6.5 games. If it's tied 6-6 at the end then they actually go to a second week, and then they go to a third week, and then if all of those are all tied, I'm pretty sure then it goes to I forget what it goes to then, but
it goes to a single Armageddon game after 3 weeks.
Right. Which is actually interesting because Kex moved on to this final in his match against me in an Armageddon game, so obviously Kex is competent there. And we see Flo continue to push the d-pawn. Just pressure this king to have to move eventually.
I guess Kex is calculating whether king e3 works after pawn takes e3, pawn takes e3, queen takes. Is there a win there? Probably not, because there's no way that rook can, or either rook can get it in time. But it's definitely worth looking at. There's also queen c2, kind of guarding that point, and there's really the only way you can sacrifice a piece after that would be knight c6, and then after d5 takes, queen takes, bishop takes, you don't really have anything, even if the bishop takes. Sorry, even if pawns move forward to reveal the bishop, there's not much there because you can't defend h7. And even if you try, the queen has an intermediate against either the king or the rook, because the rook is undefended, king is not. However, I'm going to guess we see queen takes d6, yeah. Queen takes d3.
And I should also mention, it's actually very interesting because for those of you who don't know, Antichess is solved as a win for white, e3 is winning. However, because there's so many millions and millions of variations, I get this question a lot actually. People are like, how come no human just wins every time as white playing e3? And it's just because there's so many variations and people face it so much that they become very competent and very strong with black defenses. And so it's interesting because in the World Anti-Chess Championship Final, like in any tournament, and honestly most players, including these two players, will play e3 a lot, but just to get out of each other's strong black defenses, we haven't seen a single e3 game yet, and we're already in the fourth game. And so the point of b5, I'm guessing, is just to pin down the bishop. If the king ever moves, then bishop will have to take on b5, and then it's just completely winning, so you definitely have to be careful.
As a side effect, your g-pawn's now blocked in, and you're never going to get this dark squared bishop out. So being stuck with one bishop problem is fairly bad, but being stuck with two, as one might expect, is pretty bad, or much worse. So
and I also find this double b-pawn lock with both bishops being pinned very interesting, because and now with knight f3, obviously you want to, like, there could be a sack. We could see a sack and then get rid of this f-pawn, because although you're safe right now, black can't push the e-pawn because the bishop is pinned down. If black ever resolves this and black ever gets out of this, you want to be able to have a way out. So that's just what nf3 does, is just, yeah, so you can sack the knight and then give away both pawns. But obviously, Flo has a different plan, and there you go.
This looks to be winning for white here after knight to d4. Knight to d4. bishop takes, and Kex faster. Bishop takes bishop, knight takes a7. Now it's a little bit trickier, but I think to e3 is your winning move.
Tugger, you're a little choppy right now. I don't know if it's me or you, but...
It's probably me.
Oh, why are we watching from Black's perspective? That's a great question. There, I changed it. And so now this bishop being stuck down here, you've got to guess this is winning in some form or another.
King to e3 probably seems the best choice. If king takes e7 here, or knight takes, after king e3, bishop takes, the rook can now free itself up after knight a3, and now the bishop doesn't have to take. So rook takes a3, and then you have rook d1. Rook takes a, and it's just a simple queening from there. And if the rook takes first, well then after rook takes a2, bishop takes e3, then your rook can slide over to f2.
So Kex running very low in time. And
but we see king c2, which doesn't work
no, it does
because
not.
the pawn is defended.
And although you think both knights cover c6, so you play that, you actually have knight a6 first, or this, I guess. This looks just as good.
So just a blunder from Kex, unfortunate.
Yeah. So now we go into, it's 3-1 right now, we need to get to 6.5. And so we finally do see e3 and b6 from Kex, which is considered the strongest defense. You see it a lot in long time controls. You see it a lot in long time controls because it's so sound. A lot of beginners don't play it because it's very tough. Your pieces are fairly laid back, and it's not like you get extreme development very quickly. However, it's very, very strong, and this isn't a very main line. C3 is sort of where we deviate here from what's generally played. But I do like this. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was actually expecting Flo to come out with the queen e2, and maybe we see b5, knight b4. I was prepping for, or in my prep for Flo, I looked at his games, and it seemed like he was like setting up to play that. He was playing lines that were similar, but or at least studying them. It looks like. So I wouldn't have been surprised. But c3 is a total odd move.
For the chat, Antichess is a variant of chess in which you're trying to lose all your pieces. It's a very big thing. Or I would say it's fairly large on Lichess. There's a whole community. There's the International Anti-Chess Federation. Obviously, the World Championships are going around right now between ChangeOpening or Flo and Sir Kex or Kex. Tugger and I streaming right now. We both played our bronze match yesterday for 3rd in the World Championships. And Tugger got the best of me, winning 6.5 to 5.5. But obviously, there's a lot of really strong players in Antichess. This is the final of the World Championship, so it's the best of the best, and these players have proven to be very strong in this type of format.
Kex finds a nice intermediate here. After e5, the rook has to take both the pawn and the bishop, and now there's a queen. After queen to b8.
Yeah, and this is just completely winning now.
Let's hope Kex doesn't throw it this time.
And then knight e7 probably. Okay, and Flo just resigns. So now 3-2. Oh, I gotta move this thing a little bit. There we go. Oh.
We see c4 again.
There we go.
Do you think we'll see f4? Or, okay, g4
Okay,
first.
g4. So we're deviating from the fake Polish and going into something more like this. I actually studied this for a game last year against Grohach at Grom, and this is significantly better for Black if Black plays perfectly. However, obviously it's really tough to play perfect, and also White's bishops are very nicely placed. The queen has a lot of interesting moves, so it's definitely not easy.
Because of Kex's playstyle, I think he's going to play king d1 just to protect his bishop and not allow the queen to take any more material and infiltrate. We see it. Black's plan will probably consist of bringing the king to b7 at some point and making this pawn promote. However, Black needs to finish his own development first. So something like knight f6, rook a6, bishop g7 when the time's right.
F5 also looks
Uh,
very strong.
yeah,
Um,
to counterattack
I
the
was going
knight.
to say that because also the knight has a lot of trouble. You might be able to play knight c3, but there's a lot of strange, like if you play knight c3, then you're risking d5 rook to c8. And now does f4 work? That's the question.
F4 takes, knight h6, knight takes pawn, bishop g7 takes. I'm not sure.
I think it might because, so say we see f4, knight takes, nh6, knight takes, bishop g2 takes, and then you might have something like, or actually never mind, I was forgetting the rook defended, but I was thinking rook c8, and then if the knight takes the king and you take back, however yeah, that definitely does not work, but kings can take kings in this game mode. Um, the king is just like any other normal piece.
I think Flo should play h4 here to make his plan work. Although king f7 now works similarly. So the thing I think we were concerned about with knight c3 after f4 was that after d5, knight takes d5, there's rook c8, and after knight takes pawn, there's rook takes king, and so white's left with three undeveloped pieces, and black still has their king, bishop, knight, and rook with very strong queenside pawns, while white will struggle to push the a and b due to the locked a.
And knight c3 continuing development.
So that plan could work now. However, there is now knight takes knight takes f5 at the end of that, or knight takes g8, depending on where Flo takes first. So if I were Flo, I would definitely play d5 and just rook c1 or rook c8. Sorry, that looks very strong to me. However, if you're not gonna play d5, then maybe consider. There's d5.
And rook c8. Just going for the king here.
So knight takes g8 definitely loses. Knight takes f5 definitely loses. So I think we will see rook a takes c. Well, there we go.
And although white doesn't have a king here, the rook does control quite a bit, and the black can't really get pieces all the way over to the queen side because the king is obviously pinned down. You might have an idea with something, okay, like rook h7 or knight f6, but even still, it becomes really tricky. White has a lot of space. The one thing you do have to be careful of, though, is rook g7, because rook g7 and both rooks guard the back rank.
Knight c4 here is a nice move. It actually threatens mate after knight c4, or sorry, knight d6, rook c6, and then b5, and you can slide the rook over to c, or the h rook over to c1, and plant it on c5. The bishop will have to take.
And maybe even an easier way is knight d6, king takes, rook c6, king takes, and then the bishop's just opened up for b4.
True. So in
knight
order
c4
to
a strong move.
In order to fight this, what's black's response? I don't exactly see one.
Yeah, it's very okay, and we see this. I doubt it's surviving, but you never know in these situations. My guess is something like yeah, knight a5 works just as well. I was gonna say knight a3, but obviously they're basically the same thing.
It's rook c3.
Rook c3 probably followed by a4.
H4.
I don't think h4 actually. Wait, does h4 work? I think h3 is more accurate, but and he
Oh.
goes for the intermediate.
Fancy.
So now rook takes, and then you just move your rook out of the way, and you're completely fine.
Just a4 and rook c2. Okay, we're gonna play rook b5 then. No, okay.
I was hoping for rook e1 just because rook e1. And tied 3-3 now, so it's getting close. It's always been close, and now we're going back to e3 for everyone. They sort of felt each other out in different openings, but now we finally see e3 and b6 again from Kex. This is sort of the variation. This is the candidate's variation. This is sort of the variation that we saw last year quite a bit in the World Championships. However, we do see a4, which is a little strange, but obviously Kex they're blitzing these moves out, so obviously they know what they're doing here.
Next up for white. White at some point should try to play king d1 and d3 and go for a capture chain, while black is trying to get counterplay in the form of freeing the dark squared bishop.
Another possibility could be eventually something like d3 bishop d2, just stopping the pawn, but obviously we're seeing this first. However, if c3 knight captures might be really strong, so you might want to, like, black might not even get rid of this pawn yet. That's okay, but does anyways.
Pawn takes is also interesting. You set up a capture chain on the a pawn, but we have knight takes just taking space, making sure that the king can't come forward. So black's next move could likely be rook a1, or sorry, rook a8. And development is kind of hard to continue, because after knight h6, that's really the only spot that knight can go. There's always going to be g4, and rook g1 if white needs it to attack g7, and be free up the bishop. However, here, a move to consider would be f5. It's just trying to take space, and if g4, you now have the option of taking with the pawn or the knight.
And now maybe bishop g7? Possibility, maybe?
Yeah, bishop g7 could work. The knight's defended twice, and so is d4, so that bishop will die.
And the other thing is, by getting rid of the bishop, you also get rid of this pin, and then maybe you have some ideas of, like, e5, so e5 obviously pressuring if the knight recaptures, and then you're just taking more space.
Got to be careful for the doubled rooks eventually, if you're going to give up all your minor pieces.
And d3 sort of just making space.
Do you think rook c8 could work here at all?
Rook c8. Rook c8 does get rid of that pin. I don't know if I'm a huge fan, just because you can just recapture with the other knight, and you got very nice pawns on the queen side. Your knight's still taking space, and black's still very stuck on the queen side. I forgot to switch the perspective again.
I've done it. I did that so many times last year. Spectate from Pepsi's perspective and just, oh yeah, look, he's playing white. Should probably look at it that way. Bishop h6. So Flo's first thought is going to be to scan for intermediates.
I like e4 though, for sure. Pushing the e-pawn usually very strong, because if your opponent has like g6 for example, f5 isn't that strong. You can double the knights, maybe knight b3, and then once you move the king up the board, you bring the rook into the game. White's completely developed, has so much space take over, and just sort of forcing black to stay back, and it becomes very, very tough. Very, very tough for black.
Not to say black can't do it. Their position's thorny, and one wrong slip by white is probably good enough cleaning for black. Their pieces are coordinated very well, despite the lack of space.
And an interesting thought by Firebat Prime in the chat, b5 could be very interesting. Obviously, you're not giving up any pieces on c6, and also if you give away the a-pawn, then you're threatening both rooks on the back rank. So even right now, like, b5 is still possible. For those of you who don't know why, king c6, you can't just give up all your pieces right away. For example, king c6 takes, rook d7 takes, and rook e8, because then you have rook promotion, and then when black only has pawns, it's completely winning for white, because white can just completely outmaneuver black. And the other idea behind b5 is if you play a6 and b takes, then you can just push your a-pawn, and eventually both rooks are they're too strong, Or like they protect the a8 square too hard, and you can't ever bring the king over to prevent it, because then the rook will open up on the d file, and then all you need is something like king c4, and your d rook has been activated too much. So I see b5 as very, very strong.
Another interesting idea for flow here could probably be g4, intending to stop the h pawn advance and ensure that rook h7 is possible. It forces black to play f5. So after g4 f5 takes, you've got another thorn in black's position. After rook h7, it's still possible now. However, it is a little bit weaker, so you can still probably advance, and you have time to reroute the knight. So in fast time control, I would definitely play g4, but king d2 is by no means bad, and it's just solid, waiting to see what black is going to do.
And that's another problem with this position for black is there's just no like solid objectives. You can't, like, there's nothing you're really looking to do, and black can just white can sort of make slow increases, and black doesn't really have an objective. There's nothing you can really do.
So we see king e6 here, maybe trying to set up a knight clean after king e5, pawn takes e5, rook d6, pawn takes d6, then d4 becomes possible because of knight takes d4. But we see knight d2, pulling an Uno reverse card, and that's if knight gets to c4 or e4, the rook attacks the d-pawn. So the rook will likely have to move to either a8, e8, or f8. However, we see king to d6.
I like king e3 here as well, because king e3, actually, yeah, I think king e3 works.
King e3 should be fine, yeah.
And the other thing it does is it possibly, like, it brings in a few threats. Oh, but we might see king e3 now, possibly. Actually, no. Or yeah, king e3 and then g4 maybe.
King e3 takes, g4, pawn takes knight. g5 takes. Well, Flo decides to go for it. Let's see why not. After the g-pawn gets to g5, what did Flo not like? There was just rook b1, rook takes pawn.
Or I like rook c1, and then...
Oh, the pawn covers the...
it covers c1 square. It does cover c1. Wow. That's crazy.
So white would be one move short. So which is why we see h4 first. Interesting idea to take with the pawn and keep the black pawns locked. However, you kind of hinder because f4 is a little bit sketchy now still, because this black has f5. However, whether black chooses to go f5 is something else, because there's the rooks become doubled again. So maybe rook d8 first, then f5. Maybe a6 first. Maybe you reroute one of the rooks to behind the pawns instead of behind the king. Don't know, but we see f6, maybe setting up some captures after rook f7. Maybe there's something black can do with the rook.
King d3 may be a possibility in the future. Just bringing the king further up the board, because now the pawns become very, very locked, and so I think black has much less freedom than white does. The king has to stay here as well. No, go ahead.
A good rule of thumb is that if you have no pawn moves, you're probably dead lost. It's either if you have no pawn moves or only pawn moves, assuming there are pawns on the board, because if you have just pieces, then whatever. But if you have pawns on the board and none of them can move, or if you only have pawns, then you're probably lost.
Which is part of the reason I'm not a huge fan of that pawn sacrifice.
Yeah, because it frees up black's pawn and
gives black a lot more options.
Yes. White is kind of only threatening a6, but black does have to give up one of the rooks or play king c7, just because now the threat of rook a1, knight b1, and king d1 will win the game. So I guess black now is going to push
bishop promotion could have been good as well.
Pardon?
Bishop promotion could have been maybe a little more accurate, but this should be winning for white, completely winning.
Just let's hope Flo doesn't forget that Kex doesn't have any moves and he decides to play knight b3, then that wouldn't be a great end. But yeah, bishop was probably more accurate because you can get it back faster, as in bishop a6, bishop c4, and then control the b1 square.
And the other thing is your king right now is just stuck in your opponent's territory, which it should still be fine, as we've said, because you can, like, if king promotion, like bishop promotion almost certainly loses, same with rook, same with all of those other ones. And king, with king, obviously you can set up to take the d pawn.
Knight. So I'd imagine Flo plays knight okay, knight h4. But now what?
Just all, there's too many captures.
Or burn a move with the king. Okay, knight g6.
And then just king basically anywhere.
Right.
And then, yeah, followed by knight e7 and king c8. And there we go.
Alright, 4-3 Flo. But no break call from Flo, as he normally does at the midpoint of a match. Maybe this will be it here, but we see c4, so...
Or maybe we see a break call right now. Okay, so yeah, I'm guessing we are going to see a break right here. And so while we're waiting, we let's take a look back at a few games. What game should we look at?
I don't know. Do we want to just go through them in order? Maybe
Sure, let's do that. Let's do that. Game 1, for those of you who have missed it, we saw nh3 from Flo. And this is all, they played a very like theory-ish line, queen h4, and then the only move here, takes h3, king f1, obviously. So they're going through this and there's no inaccuracies. The computer says it's an inaccuracy, however, you also have to remember that that Stockfish isn't great with anti-chess, because, or even in standard chess, obviously it's better than humans, but it doesn't always say the most accurate moves because it's also based a lot on space. For example, if you take an interesting situation is if you give an anti-chess, if you give one side a light square bishop and a bunch of pawns, and the other side a dark square bishop, but only a dark square bishop, it will say black is completely winning, even though it's like impossible for black to win because there's a light square bishop and a dark square bishop. And so because Stockfish always goes on space, it doesn't like e3, but e3 is almost like is a very, very strong move. And all of these moves are all fairly well-known theory. Rook takes f7 here. It says it was a blunder. If we turn the Stockfish on, Rook g1, like we were looking at, is the refutation.
If we go back to the queen h5 quickly, just one quick point. Kex playing king f1 has one of the higher win rates. Stockfish recommending queen h5 has the lowest win rate of all played moves. It is 30% compared to something like rook f1, which is 55, or king f1, which is 46. So it's probably smarter of a Kex to go with something to f1. Anyway.
Yeah. So after rook g1, it's almost completely winning for white in this case, if he did find it. Because black has to take on h2, d2, and then you take on h7 and you're winning. Rook takes on f1 and you're just completely winning. So you'd have to take on h2 after rook takes on e7. Rook takes, knight takes, king takes, and then white's just so much more free. The bishop's trapped. You can, like, eventually you might see something like bishop c8, so you have c4, e4, h4, a, like you can place all your pawns really high. You might even have some ideas of rook b1, so white just has a really nice position if we go back there. But instead we missed all of that. And as we continued with these moves, also doesn't like a4. That actually reminds me, I actually want to take a look at that last game. Because actually that last game was very interesting. We had several positions that were a little strange. It's called c4 or c5 a blunder. However, very strong move. and a4, which I thought was also interesting. And they both blitzed out these moves, so obviously they looked at all of this. Queen b6, rook takes, and rook d8. In particular, I want to see, for example, g6 here. Bishop g7 is what we mentioned earlier. Are you in the same place as me, Tugger? I know I'm going a little quick. Bishop g7, it does like it a lot more. And in the game we saw knight back. I think the thing with bishop g7, is, I guess Stockfish isn't seeing it.
c2.
Yeah, king c2 and then knight c3. And then the big move is king c8. So then you get rid of your doubled rooks. Your knight's a lot more free. White still is better here, but it's much, much easier to play for black than in the other position.
Instead of taking with the knight or recapturing with the knight on c3, king takes c3 would prevent king c7 or king c8.
Oh, interesting.
And white keeps the advantage.
Because in this case, if king c8, then you have king d3 takes and then bishop e2. Yeah, because now there's just intermediates both ways. So king takes would be very strong. But we didn't see that. Kept going. e4, I did like that move. Bring the knight up. And then there was a point where we thought there might have been a mate. I want to go to the part where... Okay, so f4, and then king e3 was mate. So king e3, f takes, and then rook c1. Ah, that's what it was. So we had the wrong order when we were analyzing, because we were thinking king e3 takes, g4 takes, and then g5, and then after h takes, then we were thinking, oh, you can't play rook c1 because of the pawn takes. But actually, if you play king e3 first, then f takes, and then rook c1 before g4, then after pawn takes, then you can play rook c6, and then the king will have to take both of these pawns on the side before you give up g4 and h4.
All these little intricacies that fail to find in 2-5.
Exactly. And continuing on with this sort of game, I want to see when... I do want to go back a little more, because I did think b5 was really, really strong at one point.
We had rook. It was when right after this, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, right here.
This move here before.
Like on move what?
I'm looking at on move 23.
Yeah, I was looking at that as well. b4. It still says white does keep the advantage, but it's not as strong as we had maybe originally thought. It's very strong still, but in the chat we said, who are the commentators? Could you please introduce yourselves for me? I am yourself, so I can introduce yourself for you. Hello, I'm yourself.
On the left, I'm the Unknown Guy Reborn, Canadian duo, 3rd and 4th for the Antichess World Championship.
Indeed. So, and so this is also fun for us to, and definitely an honor to be streaming this, because we have put so much dedication into this. It's been going on since September. So we've been following this and working very hard. And obviously we did pretty well for ourselves, coming 3rd and 4th. And so having the honor to stream this championship is really fun, because we've also been able to see these players play throughout and see what they've been able to do, how they've been able to grow, what variations they've been able to learn, and how they've been able to dominate. And so it is very interesting looking at this. I'm actually going to go over to Arimacot's website, a little promotion here for Arimacot. To quickly take a look at what he has for this year, and so basically the candidates is when it started to get sort of bigger. Kex came first. Flo beat out Arimacot on a tiebreaker to move on to the final four, in which I played Kex and I lost in Armageddon to Kex 6-5. And Tugger played ChangeOpening, and Flo was able to win with, that's a lot of draws, I didn't realize, 4 draws, to win 6-4. And so now we had our match yesterday, and now it's starting back up again, so we will see. So E3 this time, and the modern.
I played the modern against you yesterday and took with the pawn. I was secretly hoping to see that, but also like You need a good quality opening for for this.
Right, and knight takes, obviously, in terms of theory, is just a lot stronger.
Hmm. But we see a variation that isn't so common, which is knight h3. Some players play this, but it's kind of like a two knight-esque um, defense, with queen h4 being similar. Normally I'm used to the b pawn not being there, but we have queen f3 to prevent the pawns from being doubled. Queen takes h3, grabs material. Queen takes h3, preserves. Knight h6. And so now we have doubled h-pawns against a knight that can't really attack them, so they're not as weak. Um, but black is kind of a little bit awkward on the queen side. Eventually you're going to want to play b6, c5, maybe even d6 and trying to get the bishop out. So white is going to try and attack as fast as possible with either the pawns or the knight and bishop combo. So we see the knight first with knight b3, hoping for knight c5. I don't think neither side wants to play knight c5 because there's no follow-up for either of them. Either the b pawn's going to get stuck for black, it's just like b6 and then takes, and you don't really accomplish anything. And if white plays it, e4 isn't possible yet because the bishop takes pawn. So unless you want to trade, but black isn't forced to trade, they can just play king d8 and either force the bishop to retreat all the way back, or sack itself. But we see black play knight c5, so I guess your next move has to be b6. Yeah.
Right. b6 and then maybe c5 eventually. I should also agree with Shiaksu in the chat. That's another thing about this World Championships is there have been so many tiebreakers that it's been just, this has been maybe a little biased because I'm also playing in it, but this has probably been the most fun Antichess World Championship ever, just because, for example, going into the final week there were 5 different players that could move on in one pool, and in the other pool there was 4 different players that could move on, even going into the final week, which is just absolutely crazy. That's how strong the tournament is this year, and they're like going into the final week there was up to 10 people out of 12 that could still possibly win, and so there's just so many possibilities and so much entertainment, and in that a lot of incredible games.
Very few end games. Seeing 3 knights one game. Anytime there's like a knight end game, it always wows anybody spectating.
Right. And I'd say that's another thing that people always ask as well. What differentiates like really strong players to players who don't understand the game as well? And one thing I would definitely say is strong players don't look at a bishop or a knight and say that's a bad piece. Because I know a lot of beginners, it's like, okay, I want to get rid of my bishops and I want to get rid of my knights and keep my king and rooks. However, that's not always the case, because it's not about what piece is stronger than what piece. It's more about in your position what pieces work well in what ways. And so I think that's one big thing is if we look at these two players, they can both play extremely well with their knights. They can both play extremely well with their bishops, and they don't just give them away because they're difficult to use. And Pepsi makes another interesting comment in the chat saying, I think this final is also closer than previous years, which is what has made it so much more entertaining. The fact that all these players, no one really knows who was going to win, and even still we don't know who's going to win, and so it becomes a very, very fun thing to spectate and follow. So hopefully we can keep this up for years to come.
What do you think about bishop b2 or bishop d2, just getting the bishop out?
Bishop d2, is there any intermediates? I would say bishop d2 and probably rook to g8's probably winning. Is it not? Bishop d2, rook g8, takes on g2, takes the king. It looks completely that I would say bishop d2 and then rook g8 and black's just winning.
Ooh, rook f1. So, I guess everything's completely fine because after if rook or king f8, it's double guarded. If king f7, then the d pawn and the h pawn are both guarded, and if king f6, then the pawn can recapture. However, if we look at king f7, is there anything else that can like
I would
change?
say king f7. You might have rook g2 again.
So rook g8.
However, we just see, yeah. Or rook g8, that's my bad.
Yeah, because you can go rook h7, h6, b6, and your chain ends on a defended piece. So.
And h5 just getting more space, and so black can't push those pawns. However, black does have c5, which in return sort of traps white's bishop still, and so you can't activate the rook very well. And white also has a lot more trouble playing things like a3 and c3 to be able to lift the rook, whereas black can lift the rook very easily.
However, white needs to find a way to get this bishop out, otherwise he's going to suffer for ages. So maybe something like...
Does bishop d2 work now?
I don't think so. For...
well, at least not anymore.
Because of king e6.
Oh, right, yeah. Bishop d2, king e6 takes, king takes, and then takes there.
I think we're going to see something like king f4, and then try to set up a chain that way. King f4, e6, or, well, e6, king f5, d6, something like that. But bishop d2 now works because there's no pawn there.
Right, so, and you don't have an intermediate.
Maybe we'll see b5, trying to keep pawns and threaten b4. Like, I'd probably play b5, yeah. And then we see it. So now white gives up the bad bishop, but in exchange, like you give up material, right? So you get rid of your bad bishop, but you also, like, you're gonna be down on material later. So white needs to, like, it's very tough to say who's winning here. I would imagine black has a little bit of an upper hand because of the bishop and the strong queenside pawns. However,
I would agree, yeah.
It could go either way.
And now maybe white's gonna try to do something, maybe lift the rook to h4 eventually. I think this is really good for black that you were able to get rid of d7 and hide your bishop a little bit, because now your rook just has so much control over this 8th rank. And maybe now you can eventually push even c3 and a3 and then b4, and then you're looking very strong.
Yeah, c3 and a3 look good too, because they get off the light squared complex, so the bishop can't sacrifice themselves there. Yeah, c3 now looks fairly strong. We see rook h4 going for a chain. Or
I would definitely like to see c3 and then b4, because the bishop can still go all the way down to f1. There's no threat there.
Okay, well, now c3 isn't a possibility, but white's king just keeps running up and is trying to take the rook. So maybe white's plan is to go king e7 and just take. Like king e7, rook d8 takes, b5 maybe? But we have mate instead. Okay, I didn't see that. I was too focused on getting the king off the board that I forgot that the king moving away undefended g5.
And we have 4-4. And we see e3 again.
Do you think we'll see c5 or b6?
Or e6, or... Yeah, okay, we see b6.
Queen h5, c5, takes, c5, pawn takes, a4, queen b6. No, oh, well, yeah, c4 first.
Queen
c3,
b6.
Queen b6.
Rook a2 takes, rook takes, bishop b7. So we're going into this line again, rook d8 takes.
Flo won with this line the last time, so hopefully Kex prepared something in his little break. But we see knight h6 instead of knight b4, which is... Okay, well, that happens now. So maybe we'll see c3, g6, and bishop g7.
c3, however, before you play well, you can play g6, but before you play bishop g7, you have to make sure your knight is on, or your opponent's knight's on e2. Who do you guys think the stronger one out of these two players is? I would personally say that maybe out of the opening, like openings, Flo is very strong. He knows so much theory behind openings and main lines. The one thing I would say about Kex though is Kex is I've found is very strong in the middle game, which as most of these games do get to the middle game, which is why I think Kex has also made it like has beaten Flo twice before this in the World Championships, just because he's able to get through the opening with a relatively good position, and he's able to continue to fight and make a strong position.
I would say that Kex is also weaker in the end game. Flo, I think, just because, like Eno King said, he's been around for longer. He has that, like, I wouldn't say like end game knowledge because both players have that, but just like the end game intuition. Playing Kex sometimes will just, I don't know, either both of us mess around and just throw easy end games, but just doesn't happen with Flo.
The one thing I would say about Kex is Kex often has very strong prep. Kex is like obviously shown can play e3, can play c4, can play as black, can play b6, can play c5, can play e6, and has won matches with all of them. Whereas this is sort of the first time we're seeing Flo deviate from his normal main lines quite often. And so I would say that's another thing about Kex is his prep is just often very strong.
Well, we did end up seeing the bishop g7. However, Flo played c takes d3 instead of king takes d3. Kex missed his chance for king c8 and to get rid of the nagging pressure. And now White's building an initiative on the queenside. So we had an advance of all three queenside pawns, a, b, and c, kind of locking the a pawn and the king. And I guess White's going to continue with the plan, knight g1, knight e2, knight c3, knight a4, and maybe set something up there. The king's never going to be able to get out, and the knight doesn't really have any prospects either. It can go to h6, but once the rook stops controlling h2, there's really not any places for the knight to get out. So e6 will end up being necessary, knight e7, and your rooks will have to stay doubled. So either rook's immobile or rook's doubled. It's really not great for black, I don't think.
No, yeah, very stuck. We also have another question for both you and I in the chat, Tugger. How do you prep for tournaments? Do you have tips? I would say that prep often comes within. First of all, like endgames are very important in these type of tournaments because most people can get out of the openings very well. So you have to have strong endgames. And the other thing is learning your opponent, learning what they like to play, their tendencies. It's not always just their openings. It's do they like to play knight h6? Do they like to play knight e2? Do they like to capture on things like d2 with the king or the bishop or the queen and what sort of things happen there? And so I think it's just a lot of learning experience and a lot of and getting to know a lot of different positions for sure.
As for like doing prep as well, like making sure you remember the prep is a huge thing. I've gone through a couple rounds where I did my prep early in the week and then just didn't touch it, which is not a great thing, I guess, for anybody to do or in any tournament. Just having consistency when you learn your prep. One of the things that helped me is that I associated a song with each week or each opening, and I listened to that song while going over the prep, and then playing that in game, I'd switch music to that.
That's
it's
interesting.
Just an association thing. It's like almost the same thing to like chewing a certain flavor of gum, but
right. And I agree with the thing where you often won't play as well if you're just like if you try to do it all at once and then try to remember it. It's more like if you can do a little bit at a time but do it fairly consistently, like over days, then it will probably stay with you longer. And then you won't just have it for the World Championship, then you'll actually be able to use it in future times. And I've always found that with the Antichess World Championships, is I've been able to sort of take what I learned here and like apply it to my actual game. So I always find that like my biggest jump in knowledge or my biggest jump in learning often comes after the World Championships. So, and now it looks like Flo is winning as we go through that. However, is he actually though?
Yeah, he is.
Oh yeah.
He has e4, f4, king c4.
Right.
e6,
I missed the h4 pawn. That's why I was curious.
Well, Flo needs 1 game to ensure a draw. Kex needs 2.5. So I think Kex is going to go all out. While we see e3, so he's trying to maintain advantage from move 1. But I think Flo is definitely going to go with e6. Maybe Kex prepped b4 and bishop d3 the basic. But I think I think Kex needs to definitely change up his repertoire if he's going to get it, or ensure a win rather.
And
But
b4,
no, we see
b5,
and g5.
and g5 like we had seen in the past. Queen h5. So this is actually really interesting because this is not an opening you generally see at the top level.
This is like a hyper opening.
Yes, this is very, very strange.
I mean,
Is
I
it
guess it
even
works,
possible to take on like g5 here?
Yeah, I guess g5, queen
Okay.
takes, d2, king takes, knight f3. Maybe even knight takes could work there. e5. That's chaos.
Well, this is chaos. I'm assuming knight takes maybe.
Yeah, knight takes because bishop would just run into king d2.
Yeah. The left person on the stream is the unknown guy reborn. Okay, an h4, so this requires 2 takes on this square. The queen will have to take in one position, and the knight will have to take in another.
I think Flo has to take on or with the knight on e3 here, just because of the loose bishop. So after say rook takes, h4, rook takes, queen takes, I guess bishop takes, pawn takes, knight takes e3, pawn takes. There's no chain after that because the rook is going to be defending a2.
So you're saying queen
So
has
if
to
you-
take maybe.
Well, I'm saying knight has to take e3. That way, if the knight sacks on h3, the only way the bishop is able to continue taking would be king f1, c4, and then a2 is defended by both, or by the rook, which can't move.
So what would you suspect from Flo here?
Queen takes
Queen
first
takes,
because you only
yeah.
have one option. But you got to be careful of the bishop coming into h3. So the reason why I'm suggesting bishop takes instead of knight takes for that whole sequence is that after knight takes, f1 is defended by both king and knight, so there's no chain to begin with. But yeah, we see knight takes on e3. I would imagine you'd play f takes,
Or d
but
takes?
we see d takes. I'm not sure if d takes works because unless you're trying to play bishop d2 and king takes d2.
Right, I was thinking the same thing. Are you going to be there for the Over the Board event in Amsterdam? I'm hoping so. For me, it really depends on the COVID situation, what that's all about. But I would definitely like to be a part of the first Over the Board tournament in many years, as well as the fact that the IAF, the International Antichess Federation, does a lot of hard work, and so it'd be nice to support them for sure.
Sadly, I will not be able to go. I'm a little far from the tournament, and yeah, so it's a little pricey to fly out.
Indeed. So we see a
We
king
see-
sack, so this could
So
be...
c4 is gotta be next then.
You have
no.
Oh wait, c4, and then you
C4,
have
but
to
then-
take, and then oh, but you can't play you can't play knight
because it defends
d2 because
C4.
it defends c4.
So
Wow, this is getting risky for Kex now.
maybe he plays f4. F4. That's I think
f4, f4
'cause the
takes
queen
c.
has to take something undefended, right?
Okay, f4 takes c2 though.
F4 takes c2, f5. Bishop takes.
Oh right,
then-
yeah. It could. That's probably the best way to go about it.
Okay, we see b3. So
I liked f4, f5 now that I'm thinking about it.
f4, f5, but then okay, f4, right? f4.
Oh, but it's
Queen
getting
takes
crazy
c2,
now.
f5. What about queen takes f5?
Oh.
e4, queen takes e4. Then the bishop
Oh my
survives.
goodness. What is this game?
Well, I guess Kex is gonna go for a4 here.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I mean, you have to play something, and a3 is tough because a3, e6.
If the queen takes on b3, then you have to go to the knight. But no, it's queen takes b1 first. It's trapping in the rook. And now nothing's ever gonna get out. Like, you have to play bishop d2. And try and get that light square bishop. We see bishop f1 first, winning both bishop d4 and bishop b5. So
I like this bishop f1 as well because it threatens bishop c4 and you can't move your bishop very easily.
big Kex. Okay, we see b4, but now this just fails to c5.
Right.
And then rook b1, and it's a rook sweep.
Rook b1 and then king d7. You gotta be careful that you don't play something like e5.
E5 is... Yeah, e5 is still winning though.
Yeah, okay.
Well...
Okay, then you have to be careful you don't play something like bishop b5.
Or bishop b2 now, that'd be great. Bishop b2, rook takes g8, takes c1, but... Alright, well, Flo will take game 10.
Probably a5, yeah.
Just 3 bishops on the back rank, 2 of them are not white.
And so now, there's no way for Kex to win this week. Kex needs to win these next 2 games, and then we move on to next week, or, in another case, if Flo gets over 0 points in these next 2 games, then Flo is the world champion.
Going into a line that I played against Flo last week. Hopefully Kex has improved upon it. So we're going to see g6, yeah, takes a2, or a7, b5, rook takes a2, b6, rook a6, pawn takes b6, queen takes, and then either knight a3 or knight e2. Yeah. So g5, bishop, g5, bishop g7 was my prep from last week. However, knight e2 doesn't work now that the knight's there, because it covers the d4. So I would imagine maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe bishop a6.
Maybe.
Bishop a6. Bishop takes e7. Bishop takes e2. King takes. Yeah, well there it is. Bishop a6.
So what do you take back with here? You're gonna take back.
I normally take with the knight and try to put it on f5.
Okay. But if you take with... Oh, but now he has to take with king, because you should probably take...
Because of f4, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I guess we're going to see...
This
king
looks
d6
dangerous for black.
Yeah, king d6.
Now you have to play that.
f6, you gotta play it.
Have to play f6. Yeah, this looks very rough for black, for sure.
I would actually try... I would try bishop g7.
Bishop g7 looks very strong, actually, now that I look at it.
Yeah, you're trying to get like at least one of your bad pieces out, and there's no threat. Even if king d2 to try and play king c3 and rook e1, there's still no threat there. So
but now you don't
bishop
have it. You don't have it anymore.
Okay. I guess you have to play d3 or d4 here to prevent the knight from sacking in one move.
Oh, but doesn't f... F6 just
Yep,
win?
king takes. Oh yeah, it does. Whoops.
Because
Well,
now looks like
I
Flo's
don't
a world
want to.
champ. Flo equals world champion.
Well, congratulations then to Flo. I think they will play the last game out of
Right.
predictions for Fast Cash.
Yep.
But
But congratulations to ChangeOpening on being the new world champion. Um, we've past world champions. 2001 was Tim Remmel. 2019. No,
2018.
2018 was Arimakot, as well as 2019 was Arimakot. Moving on to Pepsi and Gaming in 2020. So now Flo in 2021 is the world champion, which it's been an amazing world championship. For all players who participated, for all people who followed, it's just been really good. Obviously, the community's grown so much, people have gotten so much stronger, and this just makes me excited for next year, honestly.
Hopefully, you can move up. Or a lot of well, some of us can move up. I don't know how many of us will play next year.
Yeah, you never
But,
know. There are always people who sort of jump in and out. Um,
Maybe Pepsi makes a return for 2022.
Maybe
I don't know
Pepsi
how
makes a
likely that is,
return.
but,
Maybe someone like Penny7 makes a return. Maybe you never know if someone from years ago could come back.
we see Shady coming in.
Yeah.
She made a brief return. Maybe
Exactly.
Who knows?
Or you even get someone from like Fix or someone like Fire Bat Prime who didn't play this year.
Yeah,
So
we
yeah,
see
they're-
just a generation of fixed players come back and destroy destroy the Leech's competition. Oh, like
Now
Jotto
this
comes
looks
out of
very
nowhere.
good for white, but you do have to take with the knight. I like that comment in the chat by Lion Killer. A good final needs two champions, and that's exactly what we saw. What a very interesting match for sure. And building up to this, we saw it's amazing that Flo got into this and will become the world champion off of a tiebreak in the candidates round, off of games won. Or sorry, no, it would have been place in the candidates. Is that what it was, or was it games won?
It was placing in the Swiss.
Oh right, placing in the Swiss. That's incredible. It's an insane story for sure.
Barely clinching the second spot in Group B and coming it back to
Yeah.
take out both.
That
Both
really
winners of
that
groups.
really demonstrates how literally anybody could have won. It's
Yeah, it
it's
could have been
quite wild.
Arima. Could have been. It could have been Bert actually too.
Yeah,
If,
it could have
there
been
was a huge upset.
going into the final week. It could have been me, you, Kex, Flo, Arima, Grom, Bert, Devanch, Ogle. All of these people still had opportunities, and it just happened that these two made it on, won their matches in the final four, and now will I feel like it didn't we were like, wow, this is crazy, but I don't think we really in the moment recognized how incredible of a world championship this was.
Tolius is saying he's sad he missed the Knight H3 game.
Missed two of them.
Jotto return leaked, says Shayaxu, and no, I was just winking for content.
So Flo
Knight
thinking
C-
in this position.
Knight C3 was suggested here. Oh, not now, but instead of G4. Knight C3. The only thing I don't like about Knight C3 is that there's bishop B5, and after takes, there's takes king. But I mean, maybe it was a position that I missed. But if last year was Flo versus me, probably I wouldn't have won. Flo's openings are too strong. Yeah, but he's hard to prep for. Like doing my prep for Flo in the semis, I found that one line that was just the one that's been playing here, and it worked, but it was just a boring. It's tough to play with black. It's not, you don't have very many chances as white. Well, that's the one that's the one he does the worst in, right? So perhaps just super hard against this guy.
Here's an interesting fact. I've played in 3 Antichess World Championships, and I've never played against Flo.
Really?
I played, for example, Tugger is my most common opponent. I played you 3 times this year, and I still have not played Flo a single time.
Yeah, because I played you in 2019, right?
Yeah, and then we didn't play in
Yeah.
2020, and then we played 3 times this year.
Well, Kex and Full have fought 3 times this year. So.
Yeah. And yet
Yeah.
there's still some matchups that you never see.
I remember saying I really wanted to see a certain matchup, but I forgot who the players were. Maybe I'll take a look at the Perpetual Check, see who they were. No wonder the guy who played Knight H3 won. Figures? Knight H3 has a pretty strong win rate in this year's World Cup.
It does.
Later today, I'll go check through all the games and just see which ones Knight H3 were played in, and I'll give a win rate for Tolius just that he can back up his argument.
I would definitely say it's because most people play E3, and then most people after that would play something like C4. Thing about NH3 is it's still really strong. Like it's an unsolved opening. It's very, very strong, and people don't know theory behind it too much. And Rook promotion.
What is Rook? Is that just a...
So Kex wins this final game. Final is 7-5, and ChangeOpening is our Antichess World Champion. So yeah. We should thank all of you for being on this stream and tuning in. I would like to thank Tugger for joining the stream with me and also on a great World Championship. Obviously, players for amazing championship, and definitely a shout out needs to be given to Shiaksu and Autumnwind for doing this World Championship. Obviously, it would not be possible without them. They're great people. They've done a lot of work for the community, and so they definitely deserve thanks. And obviously to everyone in the anti-chess community. We hope to, I think I speak on behalf of both of us when we say we look forward to more events like this and in the future, and to see more people become strong and see the anti-chess community thrive.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just gonna stop talking before I dig my grave further.
You agree.
But,
you agree.
Yes, I was trying to come up with something. No, that's it.
Well, thank you all.
You guys are a great community.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you all for watching. Hope to see you again eventually. Be sure to follow The Unknown Guy Reborn on Twitch. Be sure, I will be posting this whole thing on YouTube afterwards, so if you want to give that a look on yourself, Antichess. Tugger's Twitch is twitch.tv/TheUnknownGuyReborn. And otherwise, thank you all for watching, commenting, supporting, and I'm sure we will see you at some point down the road.